Welcome to Borak Bursa, everything about everyday Malaysian finances. Now today we don't have a special guest. Today is a special edition. We're going to be talking about Budget 2025. And of course, to my left, right here, I have Mr. Chuck, who represents the average person. He's going to ask average questions, and we're going to be discussing Budget 2025.
So let's get straight into it, right? The first average question is, for let's say the younger people, why is budget so big, such a big deal?
Okay, so if you look at the economy and we measure it by GDP, right?
Yeah.
Gross domestic product. It basically measures the output of the economy over a period, 1 year usually, right? And if you look at the actual formula, it's actually G, or C is consumer spending, investment. So C plus I plus G, which is government spending, and then net of your import-exports. So generally in most countries, well, I think in Malaysia, we're not the exception here, the G portion of the GDP, right, the government spending portion, is significant enough to actually move markets, right? And normally budgets are where we also get to see insights into the government direction of the economy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying that in some countries, the budget isn't big enough to affect the economics of that country?
I would say most countries are where the G component is a fairly significant amount in the GDP section.
Okay.
If you look at the world's largest economy currently would be the
China?
US.
Oh, the US, okay.
The US is still the largest economy. And, their deficits are huge, right?
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of, outspoken fund managers or economists have been saying, that, they've taken on too much debt.
Yeah.
So really, budget gives you an idea or have a look at what government is spending.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So if you look at the US, for example, they spend a huge amount on defense, and that translates into economic activity, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's move on to the budget in its entirety. I think overall, what we've seen so far is that, at least in the media, everyone seems quite positive about it. So first one says, Anwar, of course, saying that it's supposed to raise people's living standards, advance countries' development. Some people are saying it's representing fiscal stability. Some are saying it's a budget for everyone. What are your thoughts here in general?
I think there's no truly budget for everyone.
You can't make everybody happy, right? There's no way.
No way.
Yeah.
If you talk about even company budget,
just check our comment section anytime,
if you talk about even like something much smaller like your company budget,
Yeah.
Some departments are going to be happier than other departments, but
Yeah.
not everyone's going to be, let's all be happy, because, there's no unlimited money, right? Resources are limited or scarce.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you see the budget, I don't think it's budget for all.
Yeah.
Can't be.
Fair enough. So one of the things about the budget that people have said is that it's going to draw foreign interests. Maybe you can give us an idea of what kind of a budget strategy actually draws foreign interest and why people are saying this.
So here is where the irony sometimes is, right? If you look at foreign investors, they like to look at stable governments.
Yep.
They like to look
sure.
at what they call fiscally responsible government, fiscally responsible. Why? Because when they come into your country, they want to know that, number one, when they're going to swap USD to your local currency, that, one of the key components is, your government, right?
Yeah.
Issuing that currency.
So stability is everything.
Stability is very, very key.
Yeah. Is that the most attractive thing about a government for foreign investors? Stability?
Yes, stability in policies is very, very critical. And of course, other things like security and things like that, right? That one's assumed if I'm going to be investing. So one of the things they like to see that you're fiscally responsible, meaning that you don't spend more than what you earn.
Okay.
Right? So that's what it means by fiscal budget, which is the government budget. So every year, all the press will generally cover what they call a deficit or a surplus.
Yeah.
I think in the last 30 years, we've not heard of a surplus in government budgets in a long time. So deficits are 99.9% the mainstay, which means that most governments spend more than what they can earn.
Okay, so I was always very curious about this, and I was like exploring the whole topic of national debt, right? And every country, has a certain level of national debt. Are there any other countries out there that don't have national debt? And if so, who are they owing all this money to?
That's a very good question. I think...
right? I mean, everyone is owing money to someone. Who is this almighty being that is taking in all these IOUs? Like George Soros or what? Like...
Yeah. Okay, so in the case of the US...
Okay.
In the case of the US, so what happens is that the US government will issue what they
bonds.
call US treasuries or bonds, right? T-bills, right?
Yeah.
And typically, the central bank will buy it.
Okay.
Right? Because the central bank or the Federal Reserve in the US also has the power to create money. So that's how money is actually being created, in a sense that they print money and then I buy those bonds, then the government has money.
Okay. So they owe themselves and they're printing money to pay themselves.
Pretty much.
Okay. And then in Malaysia's case?
Malaysia's case is also quite interesting now. So in the US, because everything is denominated in US dollars, right?
Yeah.
So where you want to kind of have a look at government debt, for example, is what currencies do they hold in, because that will determine your risk, right?
Okay.
So in Malaysia, about 90% or more than 90% of Malaysian government, what they call MGS
What's MGS, sorry?
Malaysian government securities are basically bonds
Okay.
So they invest in one, minimum is 10 mil. So it's largely institutions that do this.
Okay.
It is, I think, about 3-ish%, depending on how long, about 10 years, right? 10-year bond. So 90% of Malaysian government debt is held in ringgit.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So which means that, now this is quite significant, because what it means is that, what we had in, where foreigners, demand their debt back or whatever it is, right? You have the ability to repay. So
because you can just print more ringgit?
Pretty much lah. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Okay. But then when you pay them back, you're also devaluing it because you're printing more lah.
Correct. But the risk of default by that bond itself
is
low.
Actually
quite close to zero lah.
Right.
Right.
So it's a good government policy to have debt in your own currency.
Well, it protects you from...
okay, what's the pros and cons?
Pros and cons.
So pros, you mentioned they will seldom default because, hey, I can always print my... no money. Okay, let me open my Canon printer, print 80 copies and then pass to you. Yay, settled.
Essentially, we're of course simplifying it a lot, but essentially that's what it is.
Because my Canon printer is not that good. You put water, then everything smear already. Canon, please don't sue us. Sorry. Anyway, go on. Yeah.
Now, so coming back to this, so if you look at
the cons.
The cons. Okay, so for example, in the 96, 90, or 97, 98 Asian financial crisis, IMF came in and bailed out a lot of Southeast Asian countries. Mm-hmm. We were probably the only one that said no, we don't want any bailouts. So typically when foreigners come in and give you foreign-backed loans, it comes with conditions. Right, that you must have free trade, you must have this, and sometimes these are very we may go against what the government wants to do, right? That means those policies don't match, right? So in that sense, these conditions allow us a bit more sovereignty in how we decide how we spend our money.
That's still a pro. Where's the con here?
Con of what again? Sorry.
The con of your own currency issued bonds.
Oh, the con.
Yeah.
What would be the con?
Less attractive?
Well, yeah. I guess if if you are looking for foreign investors to come in and buy your bonds, I mean, if you are a country that's probably just emerging and you're trying to build trust and that kind of thing, issuing it in your local currency, maybe a lot of foreign investors may not be comfortable holding it.
So to issue bonds in your own currency, you need credibility.
Yeah.
And also in the sense of like Malaysia's ringgit has depreciated over the last, let's say, 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah,
so that potentially could be a con of...
Could be. Government as well, government spending.
Right. So it's almost like correlated to your economy almost, right?
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely correlated. Well, it is correlated in the long term, but in the short term, we get spikes like up and down, like what happened to the ringgit last week, right?
Yeah.
But in the short term, it's supposed to. But I think we're going deeper into a discussion of kind of what gives money value or currencies value. It's it's a combination of things, right? It's your government stability, your education system, your judicial system, how sovereign you're gonna be. Like, are you open to attacks from your neighbors or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I think we larry topic already.
Yeah. That's why.
Okay, so essentially, the budget being fiscally responsible is drawing foreign interest.
Yeah, I think,
and also the stability of the government.
I think PMX has been quite consistent. The moment he became PM, he went and visited all these other countries outside, right?
Yeah.
He's been always trying to. He says, I think his strategies. If you look at what he's been doing, his strategy seems that he needs to go out there, show of confidence, and get foreign investors to come in to give the economy a quick booster. Right?
But I mean, all our PMs did that to some extent, right?
I don't. Well, I think our last two PMs before PMX.
I mean, it's MCO a bit hard lah.
Yeah, MCO is a bit hard.
Although I'm sure they still travel, but anyway.
But I think not all. That the moment they became PM, they went and visit everyone. Yeah.
So Mahathir always had a look outside, draw foreign investment back into Malaysia.
I think he had a very specific. Mahathir had a very specific policy. Is look east.
Mahathir, right?
Mahathir, yes, look east only.
Right.
So not west.
Yeah, I know. I look everywhere.
Definitely not China, right? So I think every PM will have its own
style.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So the target of the budget is to reduce our fiscal deficit. Target is 3.8% of GDP. I saw this headline. Can you just simplify it for us? Like, what does this actually mean?
Yeah. So I see if you look at this graph, it can be a bit weird,
confusing.
Right?
Yeah.
Because zero is right on top.
Yeah.
Right, and it seems that if you're not sure how to read this, it looks like our fiscal deficit is getting larger, right? If you look at just the trajectory of the graph, but actually this graph shows you that our Malaysian fiscal deficit is getting smaller.
Okay.
Let me explain what a fiscal deficit is. That means government revenue, or expected government revenue, which is your income, minus what you're budgeting to spend.
Yeah, taxes and stuff like that.
So taxes would be your revenue lah. Tax base or non-income tax base, right? Would be your revenue, government revenue.
Yeah.
And then what you're going to spend on, right?
Yeah.
Civil service and all these projects. So what is left over, right, is calculated as a percentage, right? Yeah. That means how much are you overspending your revenue in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see that, of course, during COVID, it was exceptional time. So governments, spend more, right?
Yeah.
And typically, you see, when you spend more, this is where debt comes in, right?
Because and then you print more,
you have to borrow money, right?
Yeah.
You have to borrow money to spend more. It could come from printing of money, but it also could come from the domestic economy that will buy these bonds, right?
Okay.
Just to get a fixed deposit return, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So you can see that it's more fiscally responsible because it's getting smaller and smaller. That means that the Malaysian government is being very responsible, not spending a lot more than what it takes in revenue.
But it was much lower it was actually a fiscal surplus from 2013 to 2019, is that right?
No, we were never in fiscal surplus ever.
Oh, sorry, no, zero is right on top. Okay, so it was lower up until before the pandemic.
It was lower, but we were never. I think most governments in the world will be surprised to find any government today with a surplus. However, you have to kind of balance this view as well, because you can't just look at one metric and say it's good or bad.
Yeah.
So what this does not measure is what the balance sheet of the government,
Yeah.
what it owns,
Yeah.
right? So, like example, Khazanah and things like that are all foreign, are all assets owned by the government. So that's not taken into account.
So you could essentially reduce the fiscal deficit by shedding assets, which would mean that your overall net value of the government will go down also.
Yeah, so you got to look at the balance view, but
Yeah.
seems that the press likes to focus on.
Well, I
this
mean,
number.
the average person can only digest, let's say, 5 numbers, right?
Yeah.
Not like 50 numbers. So that's why they do this.
Yeah.
you
So
know?
but I think there's overemphasis. I think it's more important is where that money is being spent.
Yeah.
Because it's for future investment and future growth, right?
Yeah.
I think that's more important than just looking at one number.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty part that I think would interest a lot of people. So let's look at a lot of things that budget is covering. Obviously, we said that the budget does affect the country significantly, right?
Yeah.
So first we got bonus for civil servants. So there's a lot of things to go through. Let's just go through them very quickly. Bonus for civil servants. This is not unusual, right?
Yeah.
There's one for every budget? No, right? There's not one for every budget, but it's a fairly common thing in Malaysia. It's a very Malaysian
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
right? Even as a layman as well, I feel like I know that already. I was just verifying with you that it is quite a common
I
thing.
guess, yeah. I mean, they call it different things, but yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. More funding for Islamic affairs, for national service. So national service coming back online. Cheaper student travel. That's an interesting one, right? Why is there cheaper student travel? Any ideas?
I guess they're trying to encourage. I mean, it's a very long-term thing, It's education, right? Or
I
education
suppose.
related,
I wouldn't think travel would be the main issue, but I mean.
But maybe this is less of an urban issue, but more of a rural issue.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay, then the other one here is more Malay reserve land. Okay, let's talk about this for a while without flaming anything, okay? Obviously, let's be honest, we are two Chinese guys here, so we have to tread quite carefully with this topic. Okay, what is the economic impact of more Malay reserve land?
Look, I think in terms of economic impact, I think it's hard to measure.
Okay.
It's quite hard to measure. Overall, I don't think anyone's come up with any form of studies to say
Really? Yeah.
it's better or worse or what.
Oh.
Yeah. So I don't think there's. It's hard to say what the economic impact is. Yeah.
So you're inclined to cut this entire part out,
I think we should
Faiz, take note,
Yeah.
Malay reserve land take out, nothing to say
Yeah,
also.
nothing to say really.
Really? I thought there would be something interesting here, but anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Increased cash handouts, pretty much par for the course
Biasa lah.
Yeah. Okay, wait, let me just say. So, are these some of the things that make you feel that maybe this budget is not pointed at, the more urban, more affluent people?
I mean, it's quite clear from PMX when he became PM.
Yeah.
The general idea is tax the rich.
Yeah.
And give it to the poor, right? Let's do a Robin Hood thing. I think he's been quite consistent in doing that,
Okay.
So I think this budget kind of just pushes that, cements that notion a little bit more.
Okay, let's take it neutrally a bit. Pull back and let's see, in general, when a country does this, is it economically positive or negative?
Okay, so so if you look at Malaysia, let's talk
Yeah.
about taxing the rich and tax the rich more, right?
Yeah.
If you look at, I remember there was a graph before, maybe you can find that.
Yeah.
Where they talk about the gap between the rich and the poor in different countries, right?
The Gini coefficient.
Is it the Gini coefficient? I can't remember. I don't think it's a Gini coefficient.
Oh, okay.
So it was really so what they mapped was GDP per capita
Yeah.
versus minimum wage.
Okay. Okay.
Right, so I don't. That's not a Gini Now, what we find in Malaysia is quite interesting, right? So our GDP per capita is about 12,000 USD Per capita means per person lah.
Yeah.
Right? But our minimum wage until very recently was
1,005 ringgit.
1,002 actually at that point, right?
Yeah.
So when you compare that figure
40x.
against like other countries in this region, talk about Thailand and Philippines, actually we are
The highest.
we got the biggest gap.
Yeah.
That means we got very very low minimum wage.
Yeah.
And we got a very high GDP per capita.
Yeah.
So in a way, we try to interpret the number, right?
Yeah.
Is that the B40 is obviously real, right?
Yeah.
And those that are in the T10, T20 are getting the benefits of that, right? So it makes sense, right, for what the PMX is trying to do is actually to close that gap, because
To redistribute.
our gap is a little bit too big lah.
But is it sustainable though? I mean, to do it in this way, or are there more fair ways of doing it?
I think fair or not fair, I think it's a bit it's not fair to who lah, right? But I think I think
Like maybe what are some other countries? How do they tackle this kind of wealth inequality in their budget? Common ways.
Common wave is a lot of taxes.
GSTs and all that lah.
GST, high income tax, high property tax.
Yeah.
if
Generational wealth tax.
inheritance tax.
Inheritance
So if
tax.
you go to most developed economies and you compare like what we get taxed here, it's actually generally very very low.
But you're talking about like socialist type.
Socialist type.
Like your Australia, Europe, and all those lah.
Australia, Europe.
The tax rates like 40-50%.
Yeah, very high.
Yeah.
US as well, right?
Yeah.
Very high. US is worse, right? Theirs is a global tax system.
Yeah.
So which means that even if you don't live in the US, you still got to pay US tax. That, but of course with that they still manage to grow, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's when and how to implement it, because when you have too big of a gap, then you have a social problem.
Actually, trend-wise, in Southeast Asian countries, we have generally lower corporate taxes and
Generally,
and lower taxes in general.
Yeah.
right? It's just
Overall
our style kind of thing, right?
Overall lower lah, right?
And generally also higher wealth inequality.
I mean, without looking at numbers, I can say that
Probably
would
lah.
be my feeling, yes.
So do you think the two things are correlated or not?
Taxes and equality.
Yeah.
I don't believe that if you tax the rich and give it to those who have less,
Yeah.
will do better for the economy.
You don't think, or you
I do not think
okay.
so. Because it adds no productivity value.
Right.
Right? You're only disincentivizing the
People
person
getting
who
super
is
rich.
more productive
Yeah.
to give it to those who are less productive. That does not work, if you
Yeah.
ask me. What may work is what you do with what you have taxed the productive with.
Yeah.
How do you make the overall country
More
or the
productive
overall
somehow.
Yeah, correct. Right? Upskilling, labor and things like that.
But
right?
it's super interesting because like so what we talked about is basically countries with lower tax have generally generally higher wealth inequality, right? Which means the poor suffer more. I mean, in TLDR, the poor suffer more, right? But it's ironic because in general, when you go to most countries and you try to introduce a tax, it's the poor that complain the most. Right?
If you try to tax them.
US, here,
Yeah.
GST, over there you had all this like healthcare stuff or whatever. They're the ones that reject it. But I mean, economically speaking, higher tax is actually better for wealth distribution.
Again, it depends where that money goes to, right? Like if it goes directly into the pockets, I don't think that's productive because you're just rewarding.
In
a
But
sort of
most
right
countries
incentive.
that have a high tax generally are more advanced countries, more developed countries.
Maybe they had high taxes after they were a bit more developed.
Yeah.
But as they were developing, maybe not.
So
I don't
cause or effect, not sure.
know. Cause or effect, not sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's another topic for another day. We always, there's so many ways to segue when you talk about budget. You
Yeah,
just gotta keep it like,
Correct.
yeah, on the low down. Okay, so fine. We've talked about it. So in general, we feel okay. Taxing the rich and redistributing that among the less fortunate is something that is not entirely a bad thing, right? So let's talk about.
It is a bad thing.
I thought you said it wasn't this stuff.
It is.
Oh,
No, so if you just tax the rich and only redistribute it to those who are
yeah,
less productive,
yeah.
it's not good long term,
Okay.
right? It win you some votes, but it's not good in long
Okay.
term, right?
Short term.
Yeah, short term, they'll probably spend it, right?
Yeah.
But
spending it in itself is also good for the economy, right?
in the short term,
Okay.
but then it has very long term repercussions, right?
Yeah.
Then this is where you see people moving their wealth outside the country and things like that, right? So you want them to keep it within the country, right, or within the economy, and that's really the whole idea. So yes, if you tax the rich and say you go and build 1,000 new schools that upskills the next generation,
or highways or ports,
yeah,
you know,
or whatever that makes
business
it more,
centers,
correct.
data centers,
I mean, it has to be productivity lah. It has to be merit based still. You can't just tax the rich and give it to the poor. Robin Hood, it doesn't work.
Yeah, fair. Okay, understood. So now let's look at the tax the rich, because this is obviously a topic that's been tearing up social media recently. First one, summer avocado.
Yeah. I must say they've got I mean, salmon.
When's the last time you ate avocado?
I don't remember actually.
Huh? Really?
I don't remember.
Okay, I had some last week.
I don't quite like avocado.
Salmon, eh?
Salmon.
At the Japanese
maybe,
restaurant or something?
Yeah, probably the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
So, what do you think about specific goods taxes?
It's just another way to tax the rich, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I guess what is perceived to be consumed by the upper or the richer folks, then we should tax it lah. I guess that's the idea. So, but it's interesting. It will be interesting to figure out how they would pick these items.
So I have a theory, and you let me know what you think about it lah.
Okay.
The more specific a tax, the worse it is, because it's A, hard to execute, B, hard to enforce, and C, creates these very strange economic incentives for everyone. You know, like someone might start making fake avocado, or, you know, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, at least for me, that I feel like that's a perception that I would have. Like, you need more generalized tax everything, and if something is more expensive, then it will, you know.
I think so if just using purely avocado and salmon, right? Whether you say tax the rich or not, that's also a different thing. But none of these products are produced in Malaysia. They're not bought in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So effectively, you can call it tax the rich, or you can call it a very specific importation tax.
Yeah, reduction in imports, disincentivizing imports.
Correct. Yeah. Right. And could you substitute salmon with something else? Possibly, right? Could you substitute something with avocado? I don't know, right? I'm not sure. But I think this is, although it's positioned as tax the rich, but really it's a tax on imports.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, imagine if they put a tax on pad thai instead, and only rich people eat pad thai, right? I mean, I'm just assuming, right? That would have terrible effects.
Sorry, that offends me already, you know. Yeah, only rich people eat pad thai.
I don't know, right? I'm just saying, or maybe
I eat pad thai. I mean, I'm okay, but
pick something local that is expensive.
Yeah.
That maybe the upper middle class always consumes.
Yeah.
Would they tax that? I don't think so.
I'm trying to think of a specific example. Durian.
Yeah, correct. That's pretty expensive, right?
Yeah.
Especially maybe Musang King.
Yeah.
Right. Would they dare to do that?
That's a good observation. Would they dare to tax durian? There's your clickbait headline right there, man.
I don't think so.
So what do you think will happen if they tax durian?
Oh.
Versus taxing avocado, okay? We're talking about same things, two expensive fruits that people like.
I think it's going to get a lot of backlash, popularity-wise. But if there was going to be an export tax on durians, maybe, right? Because
that'd be great for us, right?
That'd be great for us, because that affects foreigners, and because we are the only ones,
What do we have?
Arguably, I guess we make the best durians in the world.
I don't think that's arguable. I think it is.
It is the truth, right? So and we export a lot of this durian as well, right? So
do we have export taxes for durians?
I don't believe so. No.
Oh, what do we have export taxes for?
What do we have export taxes for?
I didn't even know there were export taxes.
We have for palm oil.
Really?
Yeah, palm oil, yeah.
Oh.
Not technically an export tax, but it behaves like one, because when you export crude oil prices, now they have windfall taxes, right?
Right.
So anything above 3,001 in Peninsula and 3,006 in Sabah and Sarawak, there is a percentage of tax, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
or it's a windfall tax lah. Indonesia applies export taxes on crude palm oil because they don't want them to be just a raw material producer. They want them to have a supply chain as well. So they won't tax if you have processed it somewhat because you would have created jobs or something locally.
Right. So it's only crude that
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, interesting. So avocado with durian, that would be very interesting to see. The next tax. Okay, so then what about the subsidies for healthcare one? So now they are reducing subsidies for healthcare for T15, right? In fact, there's a few T15 related things here. They're also saying no more subsidies for in residential schools and public varsities, and then also petrol. So this was a huge topic, and we were talking about classification of T15 in a bit lah. But do you think these things are okay? Like, do you think these things are? Let's move away from unfair, I guess, but unsustainable.
No, in fact I think if we talk about our fuel bill every year, I think that's unsustainable.
That's unsustainable.
Unsustainable. Like
as in how much we're paying in fuel subsidies.
Yeah, like why did fuel subsidies exist in the first place, right? So this was 30 years ago when we were just an emerging nation, and yes, we wanted to, and I believe these subsidies were in even before Petronas was formed. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was really to get the economy going, right? To kickstart the economy. 30 years later, we're still dealing with this, and we've moved quite far along from 30 years ago, right? So if you ask me, like, you just go next door, like literally next door, if you go to Thailand or even Singapore. For Singapore, that's a weird exception, right? But if you go to Thailand, it's market prices. No one has subsidized fuel there, right? And
how many countries in the world still subsidize fuel? I mean, sure, like the Arab states,
all the Arab states still do that.
Aside from Arab states?
Aside from Arab states, or maybe the South American states.
Okay.
Yeah. But otherwise, generally, there's none. In fact, there are taxes on fuel. Yeah. Not the other way around. Now it's like, giving you a discount on. So I think it's the right move to move away, but because it's such a
huge addiction.
Yeah, it's such a huge addiction. It's very difficult to remove, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing about fuel subsidies, right? There's almost, I can say, no long-term benefits, Yeah. Because the moment you spend it, it's burned and it's finished. Yeah. And then we get addicted to it. Yeah. Whereas, we spend something like $60-80 billion on fuel subsidies a year. Yeah. How many schools, hospitals?
What if the government were to?
We could fund, right?
How do you think the public would react if we remove the fuel subsidies and remove the vehicle taxes?
Oh, I think that will have major implications.
I mean, it's give something and take something, right?
I think number one, the banking industry will have
will be in uproar lah.
The banking industry will probably be the most affected. Because if you had bought a imported car that cost 200,000, and now after my
suddenly it's worth
50,000. That's going to become quite a huge hole. So they can't do that as well. So it has to be on a gradual basis.
As with most policies lah.
With most. So something such a big, so big, right? And because the narrative here is to tax the rich and not give them fuel subsidies. And I guess if you looked at it holistically, it looks like it makes sense because the rich don't need subsidies and they can live without subsidies. But how are you going to execute it on the ground? It's going to be very, very difficult, right? I think they tried Padu, and then it's gone quiet. We don't know what happened to it. Because you're trying to get demographics, right? So instead, one thing that could have been done is say, look, every 6 months, we're going to increase around 10 cents for the next 5 years. And everyone kind of gets, okay, we're going to price this in and it's gradual and it's expected. What we don't want is, unexpected change in policies. And people cannot plan for it. That's where you get huge spikes in
that's where you get your queues going to the petrol station and all that kind of
thing. Right. Or you get huge spikes or price spikes and things like that, right? I remember last time under Badawi's administration, fuel went from $1.80 to $2.70 overnight, right? And then they gave out $900 in subsidies or something like that, because oil prices went up to almost $100 back then, or more than $100, right? So so it's hard, but yeah, I think it's I would say it's the first move. We'll see how long it takes to implement that, or how easy it is to implement on the ground.
But basically, like, can I say that every administration knows that fuel subsidies is something that they have to cut eventually?
I think,
and that they're not, if they don't cut it, they know that the next guy will have to cut it because it's just not sustainable.
Well, I think, here's the difficult part, right? Because, if you have a very strong mandate as the government, like let's say you had 2/3 majority, then you would have
the power
to do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Jokowi did. The first thing he became president in Indonesia, the first thing he did was increase fuel prices.
Right.
He had a strong mandate. He knew he would survive.
Yeah. Because it's a very unpopular move.
Very unpopular move.
Among businesses, among consumers, among everybody lah.
Everybody, correct.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing where everybody will hate it lah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But we right now have a unity government.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very loose coalition.
Yeah.
And doing the right thing could be political suicide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's tricky.
Okay. What about healthcare and schools? Any comments?
To be honest, I'm not sure what subsidies that T15 are getting for schools or public. I'm really not so familiar with that. Healthcare. Healthcare is always a tricky thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I think in Malaysia we're so spoiled for having government healthcare, free healthcare.
I mean, essentially free healthcare.
Right. So if you speak, if you tell an American today that
healthcare,
right, they're like, what? I don't understand, right?
How much are you guys paying for Obamacare, man?
yeah, exactly, right. It's so capitalistic there, but I think we've retained a lot of the British style of doing things, which in UK they still have the NHS, right?
And that's a huge bill too, right, for us?
It's huge. It's huge. It is a huge bill. I think it's a very it's a very challenging thing to kind of debate. But I'm really not sure when they say how they're going to implement some of these subsidies. It's quite hard, actually.
Yeah. So we talked about this. You talked about this on your channel at Alvin Equities. If anybody wants to check us out on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter, X. So the T15, like, how do you even classify this, man? I mean, so there's a few challenges that you talked about over there. So one of the first challenges was, is it by state or not, right? Because I think it's a huge difference, right? If you calculate the overall T15 of the whole country, I think it's 6,005 per household or something like that. And in KL, that doesn't feel like T15 lah. I don't think I'm being atas for saying that lah.
Yeah, I think for household 6,000 plus.
So 6,005 T15 means that you're rolling in it. Like in KL 6,005, it's hard, man.
Yeah, I think it's, again, we talk about data, demographics and all, right?
Yeah. What's KL T15 again? Something like wait, I think
8,000. I think.
No, I think it's higher than that.
Let's have a look.
Anyway, so it's, let's say, around like 10K like that, something 10, 11K if I recall correctly.
Household, right?
Yeah, household. So that seems at least a little bit more like it. But how would they classify that? So let's say, for instance, right, I live in KL. Okay, let's say they do it. Let's say they do it by country. Okay, sorry, the whole country, 6,005. You're T15. You don't get to buy cheap petrol anywhere. You don't get healthcare anywhere. You don't get school anywhere. In KL, that seems like a bit harsh,
Yeah.
But then, if you do it the other way, and you say like, okay, we do it by state, right? So I am T15 in KL. Let's say I earn 12,000 bucks and I qualify as T15 in KL, but I don't get fuel subsidies if I go to Kelantan. Like, like if I drive to Kelantan, do I?
Oh no, I think it.
Or do I just get a T15 stamp on my IC?
I think again I don't know, man. Yeah, probably, right. You're not eligible for any fuel subsidies. Full stop.
Yeah.
And
then what about liabilities and all that also? Like your housing loan, your car loan, and all that. That's gonna cut into your expenses.
Yeah, I mean, I mean,
What's a fair way of doing this? Is there a fair way of doing this?
What, fuel subsidies?
No, T15 tax. T15 categorization for higher taxation.
You know, I think B20, B40, these are all honestly marketing terms.
Oh,
They are not
Reality.
financial. They're not financial terms, right? There's no,
Right.
you know, you can't pick up a textbook and say how to calculate T15, T10, right?
Oh,
This
okay.
does not exist. This is very much you know, just like terminology like millennials and baby boomers. These are all marketing terms, right?
I always thought this was a math thing.
No, it's not a math thing. No
Really?
way. Yeah. I don't think no one has figured out a way to figure out T10, T2, T15, right? You know, T15 in what, right? Like you said correctly, if you do the whole country, how are you going to work it out? 6,000 seems barely enough.
But it
in
is a
urban
math thing.
area.
I mean, like T15 on a countrywide basis, there is a mathematical way to calculate it.
Why I say this is not this is very much a marketing term, because again, you're only looking at income level.
It's not meaningful. That's
It's
what
not
you mean.
meaningful, right? So if
Yeah.
say today I was single, and I had $1 million in assets,
Yeah.
and I just choose to chill and take it easy, and maybe earn 5,000 a month,
Right, because it's monthly income tied.
right?
Yeah.
So should I get subsidies? Generally, you should say no, right?
So you're saying that you should tax based on assets?
Well, you need to look at it holistically, and that's what Padu was trying to achieve, was to collect data, right? Or say if we say today, okay, I earn 20,000,
Yeah.
but you know I have my elderly parents to look after,
Yeah.
2 of them, say husband and wife, so you got 4,
Yeah.
plus I have 3 children,
Yeah.
and a husband and wife, you know, they earn more than 20,000. Are they eligible to subsidies?
Yeah.
And they live in an urban area,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's again, you know, T15 talks about income level, doesn't talk about asset level. It's, to me, it's a marketing term. It's
So I feel like, okay, why aren't they, instead of doing all this stuff, which seems so complicated and administratively expensive, right? You have to
Yeah.
come up with a new app and all that. Why not just increase the income tax?
because it affects everybody. Oh, I mean, they can, but if you look at government revenue or how much we can
No, just increase the income tax for T15. So above a certain bracket, make it, you know, like higher. That's,
They can,
wouldn't that be the logical way of doing it? But this makes better headlines.
I guess so. I'm not sure. I mean, there are a lot of ways to skin it, and I'm sure there are a lot of smart guys in the government trying to figure it out, because what they're trying to do, you know, administrative is very, very difficult to
Yeah.
enforce. I mean, just to give you an idea,
Yeah.
right? Like, think about this. Foreign car driving into a petrol station
Yeah.
cannot pump run 95.
Yeah.
How do we know for certain there is 0 leakages?
I mean,
For certain.
you never know.
So if you drive into Perlis from Ulu, petrol
Singaporeans, I'm sure, are
station,
doing this all the time.
and then they
right?
pump 95.
Yeah,
So are there leakages? Yes.
of course.
Right. And that's so simple, right?
Yeah.
So can you imagine this so complex, right? And I
And then someone was saying, like, if it's based on IC, right, then just get your driver to pump for you.
yeah.
I'm not saying I have a driver. I don't have a driver. I mean, I don't have a driver. He does not wear a hat. Yeah.
Neither do I. I don't have a driver.
You sure?
I drive myself.
Yeah, because you enjoy driving so much, right?
Yeah, but you know, so it's so administratively difficult. And,
Yeah.
And how are you gonna profile every single household?
Yeah.
It's gonna take you years, right?
So this is what I was saying back just now. Like, the more specific a tax, the more unsustainable it is, because it's like you might, let's say you gain, you know, 4 billion in tax revenue or less in subsidies or whatever. How much does it cost you to build the app, to track everything, you know, to put all these new IT systems in place to make sure that, you know,
And
and
it'll
then
still be inaccurate.
yeah, and then also like, at the petrol station now you need IC verification, you know, that's a new process everyone has to learn, that's a new machine and all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Are you actually going to save any money out of this? You know?
It's
I think that's my question. I have no issues with a tax on T15. I feel like, okay, fine. But
how is it going to be executed?
correct. And make sure that, you know, at the end of the day, there's actually money coming in. And of course, like you said, make sure that money goes to good things. So there's a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on. So this one's very specific, and this one's specific to our industry, which, you know, obviously we deal in equities here at EquitiesTracker. And the government is introducing a 2% tax on dividend income exceeding 100,000. So I'm not bothered by this because obviously I do not get dividend income of 100,000. What kind of portfolio size are we looking at here? Just like,
you know, I think so roughly looking at 2%, $2 million. $2 million at 5% dividend yield, you're gonna get $100,000. So clearly aiming at the rich lah.
so 5 million.
No, 2 million.
Okay.
Assuming $2 million your asset portfolio value,
Okay.
and you get a 5% dividend yield,
Yeah.
that's 100,000.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So basically, your portfolio size has to be 2 million and above, like in general, lah. If you're assuming 5% dividend yield, which is quite normal, which are on the high side, right?
Oh, I think it's so on both on high and low side lah. So it depends how you want to tweak it
Okay.
lah. So
Okay.
could be above, could be 2.5 million, 3
So
million.
anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 million.
No, it's definitely more than 2 mil lah. Definitely lah.
And we're not talking about overall wealth. This is just your stocks,
Yeah,
right? Not
stocks.
counting your crypto, not counting your Lamborghini or whatever, right? Yeah. So it's what do you think?
This is clearly like a T1, T2, right? Very clear.
Yeah. It's like making a chauffeur tax.
Yeah. It's very specific lah, this tax. Of course, I think recently our PM also came out and said that it includes both private and public companies.
Right.
So essentially, they are taxing shareholders because only shareholders are entitled to dividend, and typically shareholders also tend to be business owners as well.
Yeah.
So and because companies pay dividends, right?
Yeah.
So quite common. So, but I think what's been kind of left unanswered, and I think there still needs to be things that explain. So it's actually not substantial if you think about it.
Not substantial.
It's not very substantial. So it's to start with lah, because he did say that.
So let's do the math here. Someone who let's say has 2 million worth of equities,
Yeah.
and they have 100,000 worth of,
Dividend.
and they're paying 2,000 ringgit in tax.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
For a full year lah.
so my question is differently. Why bother? How much income could they possibly make from this? Or are there people who have hundreds of millions of ringgit in tax, in stocks, and you know?
You do. I mean, if you think about the late Teh Hiong Pao, who passed away, owner of Public Bank.
Okay.
I believe just his share portion alone,
Yeah.
I think a year they get over $1 billion in dividends.
Holy crap!
Yeah. So his heirs, which is 4 kids,
Yeah.
now will have to cough up, 20
So
million.
let's say as a country we're talking about maybe 100 to 150 million ringgit in taxes or something like that from this. Is that?
But it's a start, right? So then they go to 3, then they go to 4, then they go to 5. then
So
they
you're
go to
saying
6.
this is the start of a policy?
It's a start, yeah.
You reckon that's
He already said that actually this is a start of policy,
okay.
and to start with 2 is very, very low.
right?
It's to get the whole infra in place, so it takes time, right?
Has this been done in other countries?
I've not seen this being done in other countries because this is quite new. Yeah, but I think a lot of questions are left unanswered.
Yeah.
Example, is it anything above 100,000?
Yeah.
Then you get
right.
taxed 2%, right? So, or is it the moment you
whole-
hit 100,001 ringgit,
Yeah.
then the 2% applies? So I think that's left unanswered. I think what's also left unanswered again is that a lot of companies are structured in a way where they have subsidiaries. So like EquitiesTracker, we have subsidiaries where our shareholders sit on top, which is the holding company.
Yeah.
So the subsidiaries would pay a dividend to the holding company,
Yeah.
and then the holding company then pays on to the shareholders, right?
Yeah.
So
Is
does
it double
this
taxed?
does this get taxed again? I
Yeah.
don't know. That's again unanswered, right?
Yeah.
Of course, in the budget speech, it said individual, but from what we understand, individual represents an entity, either a corporate or what. So I think there are a lot of these questions get unanswered right now. And then if you if you build a portfolio and you're holding it for the long term, they did cover it under unit trust, right? But for private mandates where you hold investments for long term, does that get taxed as well?
Yeah. So wait, then in unit trust, how the hell would it work?
Unit
Because-
trust, no, there's no. So unit trust is exempted.
Oh, okay.
Just like
okay.
EPF and also
Okay, so any sort of like even the ETF would be exempted, lah.
I think like collective investment schemes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that could be the loophole, lah. Really. In a way, lah. I mean,
Yeah,
because,
in a way, lah.
because they charge a 2% sales fee anyway, or
No,
whatever.
but because I think it's impossible to figure out, because unit trust people move in and out all the time.
Yeah.
How are you going to figure out how much dividend everyone's entitled to? So it's not practical to tax a unit trust.
Okay, so if this sees the light of day, how do you foresee this affecting the market? Will it slow the market down? Because then dividend stocks are not as attractive to the ultra rich?
I think those who are ultra rich
Yeah.
generally already own a company that
Okay.
generates quite a lot of income, and then they pay themselves dividends. So they will be affected the most.
Okay, so this is not targeted at people buying stocks. These are
I don't
targeted
think so, yeah.
more of like business owners paying themselves dividends out of the company.
Correct.
So would that then discourage business owners to pay dividends?
Yeah, possible.
So that means potentially overall in the whole market, dividends might drop. Might.
It might.
Yeah.
Or companies may do things like doing share buybacks
Yeah.
instead of paying dividends, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know.
There are many ways to skin.
There are many ways to skin it, lah. So
Yeah.
again, taxes will encourage or discourage certain behaviors.
Yeah.
So I think it's wait and see. But I think generally, it shouldn't affect the market,
Okay.
the general market so much, lah. But so the ultra rich will get taxed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Then I think the second last one. This one is So EPF intergenerational wealth transfer to be introduced. So let's first try to explain what this means. You were explaining it to me just now actually before we started rolling.
Yeah, it seems like that if let's say father and child or a parent and child, if the parent was eligible to take out EPF money,
Yeah.
they could then transfer their portion without taking it out, move
Yeah.
it into
Their kids' portion.
Their kids' portion,
Yeah.
which will be locked in there until they turn 60.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the thing never to forget about EPF, that you can't withdraw it fully until you are 55
60,
60, yeah. Yeah.
Or 55 for some, 60 for some. Or
Okay.
55 for all, sorry, right now.
Yeah.
55 for all, yeah.
Yeah. Except if it's in a country lah. And I assume some of it will be transferred to a country as well.
Correct.
Yeah. So essentially what this does is, it just provides is this only on death or?
I think it's again quite new. I think it's an ideation. I think that's what they propose to do. But
But it's supposed to be like this. They're supposed to be just like, hey, let's toss around a few ideas and tell the whole media and get the whole country riled up and we'll see how it goes, Like, is that normal?
I think they would have definitely had some back-end discussions.
Yeah.
Because, budgets are tightly held secret.
Yeah.
So typically media has an embargo until, it gets published,
Yeah.
right? So I won't be surprised if there are certain discussions that have happened, but nothing seriously concrete until the budget's announced. So, or could be the other way where everything is more or less concrete and then they roll it out, right? So
But in Malaysia, typically, not really right? Things are still quite fluid, right?
I think like all these new taxes, I don't
Yeah.
believe the whole Inland Revenue Board understand exactly how it works yet.
Yeah.
So there will still need to be some sort of thought process behind it. And look, it's 2025, so in a way they're still buying some time that it only happens next year. So up till this year, you still can pay dividends and do all that.
So I'm reading that it says that it's actually EPF is still reviewing its schemes and blah blah blah. So you're right. It seems like something that's probably not concrete.
Not
just yet,
confirm, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
double confirmer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one is something that we talked about with I think it was who was it that we talked about this with
Dr. Ye?
not Dr. Ye, before Dr. Ye. God, his name is escaping me right now.
Bo.
Not Mr. Bo.
Wei Chi?
Huh?
Wei Chi?
Not Wei Chi.
I don't know. We had so many guests.
I know his talk also like in the back of my head. Like,
Mr. Tu.
huh?
Mr. Tu.
Mr. Tu. That's right, Mr. Tu.
Yeah.
Yes. So minimum wage is finally up to 2007.
Mm.
How does this affect everyone?
I think the I think it's positive if you ask me. So
Okay.
just now we talked about
Me too.
GDP per
Yes.
capita
Yes.
versus minimum wage.
Yep.
We are the largest gap in this whole region, right?
Yeah.
So we're closing that gap. So that's a good thing. I would say urban areas,
Yeah.
no one's affected. I mean, generally, if you live in an urban
Yeah.
area, I think this minimum wage thing does not really apply anyway.
Yeah.
But we can see that this is now a trend. So it's going to go 1.7, 1.9, 2.2, 2.5, and 3.
If the government stays as it is, lah.
I think regardless of government, they're going to keep pushing this
You
because
reckon?
it's a very popular move,
Yeah.
right?
I think it should be 2K. Honestly, like.
But the general populace will be, okay, great, good for me, right? Because most are wage earners, right?
Yeah.
But I think for the business owners, of course, now you got to start thinking about being efficient, a bit more labor efficient, because you can't just say labor's cheap anyway. Let's put 10 guys on this rather than go for a more efficient route and more difficult route, or automate things and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think generally this is a very popular move. Most voters were like this, right? But we're still closing that gap, lah.
Yeah. What is your knowledge on like minimum wage around the region? Like, are we one of the lowest still?
I think we
or?
are one of the lowest.
We're still one of the lowest.
We're still one of the lowest.
Maybe we
I
should.
mean, the last
research
time I
this.
did it was 1,003. We were
Oh
one
god.
of the lowest. Actually,
Yeah.
right. But I think in urban areas, like minimum wage things don't apply.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you talk about foreign workers,
They're getting about 3 to 3.5.
most foreign workers are way above this anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, so I think it's a no. There's really no market forces are much higher than this anyway.
You think this will push up inflation?
Not at this level, lah. Don't believe. I think it's very minimal impact. Almost can say close to no impact.
So this is just a good move with minimum impact. So that's a great thing, lah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because market forces are already higher than that.
Yep.
So pushing the minimum wage up
Yep.
makes almost no difference to
Yeah.
it.
It's just almost like a sweeper move, lah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's move on a little bit from budget topics, because there were a few other things that came up this week. Just two other things, actually. One was that our national debt is now 1.173 trillion ringgit, and that sounds scary. Assumedly, we broke the trillion barrier like quite recently, lah. Right? And we talked about this earlier in brief, national debt. So, first of all, you said that the majority of this is in ringgit.
More than 90%.
More than 90%.
Yeah.
And that's been the case since time immemorial.
Yeah, it's been for a while, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's
Wow,
so we're okay lah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like
the government won't default like Greece defaulted in 2008.
Yeah.
Or Portugal defaulted, or Ireland defaulted.
In fact, now with our ringgit being on a particularly good run, I mean, of course, it took a dip recently, but being on a particularly good run, wouldn't this be positive for people who have bought Malaysian government securities?
I guess if you're a foreigner, yes.
If
But
you're a
if
foreigner.
you're in Malaysia, no difference.
Do you know whether the majority of people that buy our securities are foreigners or locals?
I think they are mostly local.
Oh,
mostly local.
okay,
I
interesting.
understand. Very, very small foreign shareholding.
Oh,
Very, very small.
okay.
Anyway, we don't have attractive yields anyway.
We don't have what, sorry?
Attractive yields.
Okay.
We're now at 3.2%. Not more
What's
than 4.
normal?
I mean, the US now, they're still, even with the reduction in interest rates, you're still getting 4.8 to 5%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you just buy US government bonds and just leave them be.
for now, lah.
It's like EPF already.
Yeah, for now, lah. Because why would you get out of a US dollar and get into a riskier
Yeah.
currency?
Yeah.
And then if let's say you were a foreigner and you're denominated in US dollar,
Yeah.
why would you do that to get a lower yield?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the bonds they stay attractive because of the yield, lah.
Yields. Correct.
Regardless of whether or not the currency.
Because
itself
we were another one of those countries that didn't follow Western economies that raised interest rates from 0 to 5.5%.
Yeah.
In 13 months, right? We went from 1.75 to 3-ish, right? So we didn't follow that trend globally. That's why our ringgit also suffered.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But now we are reaping some benefit from what we did, or?
I think not so much of what we did. We just didn't follow suit because only the G6 countries went in tandem to do that. Most countries did not follow. Yeah.
So this article by Chili Sauce, which used to be my publication last time,
Sure.
I was very proud of this article actually. But one of the conclusions that they had was that the percentage of GDP to debt was important, and I think Malaysia is at 61%.
Yeah.
And then somewhere like Singapore is at 131%. So their debt is 131% of their GDP. Which is, I mean, for the layman, pretty scary, right?
Correct.
What do you think about this?
I think I think this whole debt to GDP is a very poor measurement.
Okay.
Why I say this is like because in a way both are unrelated to each other in a way.
Okay.
Right. So if I want to look at, am I able to service your debt?
Yeah.
Which is what this metric indicates. It does not mention any of that because it's government revenue versus government debt. That should be measured against whether your ability to repay or your over leverage. If you measure government debt to GDP, government doesn't make GDP, right? Its revenue is not GDP.
Right. So government's okay. So what is government's revenue then? Government's revenue,
Tax or non-tax revenue.
Total tax.
Total tax.
But that's not often publicized figure, right?
Well, you can get it from the Auditor General.
You can, but they don't talk about it, right? For some reason, why?
Yeah. Which I find
Tax revenue, total tax revenue.
I find it very perplexing because it's almost unrelated. You can see it's not related, right?
Yeah.
So GDP is what you, me, everyone here, and the whole country contributes to the general goods and services, or measure of goods and services, or production for that year. That's what it does.
Yeah. And then
it doesn't. Not all that goes into government coffers, right?
Yeah.
So, how much debt you have in relation to GDP? It is a metric, yes, it measures, but is it very meaningful? I don't think so.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way before. Maybe we should talk about total tax revenue. I'll try and get that number and post it up online as well.
Thanks everyone for joining us on Borak Bursa. I hope you enjoyed this session. This is a special session for Budget 2025, which we hope to do every year. Don't forget to follow our link in our bio, and don't forget to like, subscribe. If you like more, share this podcast as well with your friends.
And if there's any questions that we didn't answer about Budget 2025, please let us know in the comments, and we'll try to